Hey there, hi there, ho there, everyone. Welcome to another segment of our mini seminar, this time again on the legal implications and sickle cell disease, part two. And welcome. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending upon where you are viewing us and listening to us. My name is Dr. Carolyn Rowley, and I am the Executive Director and Founder here at Cayenne Wellness Center, where we've been doing this for since the year 2000. Thank you. I did want to give a shout out to our compassionate community health workers. Uh, they are there to bridge things that are happening, support, advocacy, what have you. So I want to be able to just thank them now. Northern California, CHW, Hope Medina, our Central California, CHW, Shantae Johnson Harris, Los Angeles, Day Hatchett for Inland Empire. We have Maxine Ortega. For Orange County, we have Stark Simmons. And for San Diego, we have Yvette Serna. We also have a bilingual CHW, Yvonne Avila, which is wonderful for those clients who only speak Spanish. And we also have a couple of CHW assistants, Tarina Strong in Northern Cal, and again, Yvonne for Los Angeles. So thank you. Help me thank them for the work that they actually do. I also want to bring attention to what's coming up soon is we've been doing it for 17 years, but it is named the 15th Annual Sickle Cell Disease Educational Summit. We are focusing on giants, visionaries, and pioneers who have led the way and where we were, where we are, and where we're going. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be in person in California, in uh, Los Angeles, actually Torrance, California, but that's a part of Los Angeles. And so that's September 13th through 16th. We invite you all to come join us in person or virtually. Also, I wanted to just bring to your attention that we also have mental health counseling. So if you reside in California, you have sickle cell disease, we have mental health counseling for you and your family, starting with age 9 and all the way for our young folks who are 70 plus years of age. So we don't have anything for our younger than 9 at the moment. We are actually working on that. So let someone know if this is what they're looking for. We actually have counseling available. Then we also have our STAC, Sickle Cell Trait Awareness Campaign. And so, 5-year campaign where we are working with everyone to spread awareness of do you know your trait status? And we're focusing on middle school, high school, and college age students. Um, but of course, the entire population of California to know their trait status. Pretty soon, we will be able to partner with those across the US to be able to offer this as well. So look for STAC if you're in California and you want to be an ambassador and you want to get trained as well as go into the schools and uh, and share the information to students. Contact us. It will be great to have you as an ambassador. All right. Those are just some of the few things that we actually do. Um, but we're here, you're here for part two of legal implications in sickle cell disease. So, what I would like to do right now is this and the last segment as well was moderated by attorney Art Grant. So, let's bring him on.
Hello.
Hey, Art.
Yes. Hi.
So,
How are you?
I am wonderful, really.
Great.
So I recall that we had such a wonderful, robust conversation last time regarding legal implications in sickle cell disease, and you were speaking about the difference between um, filing a claim and filing a complaint, and really making our audience aware of the difference, because there are many times that they encounter situations and they may only be able to do one versus the other. So I was hoping that you could summarize that for those that may have missed it. If we can talk about that before we then go into our topic today, which is medical discrimination. So, would you like to summarize that for us, and so that the audience can kind of have that information, see if they have any questions before moving into today's topic.
Okay. Yes, we talked about the situations of the continuum of where um, patients with sickle cell normally they present at a facility and they're in crisis. And things are moving quickly. They're under a lot of stress. They have adrenaline running. They've probably been taken by someone or someone's, and so we find ourselves in sometimes getting care or treatment or attention that they deem is um, not adequate. And sometimes they feel that they are actually being treated so poorly because they've been in situations before. So they know what's good, what's bad, and what's wrong. Generally, they know. And many times they actually know what they need. It may be a controlled product, but they know this is for my situation, for my condition. This is what I get relief from. And sometimes medical staff feel that you know too much and you may know more than they do. And so, one, they don't trust you. Two, they may not believe you. Three, they may feel that you are manufacturing something because, unfortunately, the pain relief therapeutics are many times controlled substances under the law. So they just don't want to start doing what you say, even though you know what you need and you know how it should be administered. So there we get into sometimes a conflict. And many times, number one, sickle cell is a condition that occurs in uh, people of African origin. And people of Northern European origin don't really understand. They don't have a real basis for understanding. They didn't pay attention in high school science about how it works, how we get it. And so, and it's not well taught in many health schools. So, um, when you present on one side from a legal aspect, and I want to always stress, you want to seek and get treatment first. Don't go in trying to look and feel like you have some kind of a claim. Get treatment first. Now, when we start, uh, you can present. Uh, if you're going to an emergency room, they will log you in. They will ask you what your problem is, what your complaints are, how long you've had your symptoms, and uh,
And then, so Art, let me say this: when
yes,
they ask, when they, so sometimes they ask, "How long have you had your symptoms?" which is a more appropriate question, But there are times that they'll say, "How long have you had sickle cell?" And that is inappropriate. It does leave one suspect that the person who is now treating them has no knowledge, no information about sickle cell disease, and it does leave sickle cell warriors feeling as if they're not safe, whether it be the nurse and or the physician who's asking the question. Just wanted to uh, say that right there as you continue.
No, that's a very good point, because that's why I got back to the high school science and biology, where you learned how the parents and the genes in the family, if you married someone else, you were born with it. That's the only way you get it. So when you say, how long have you had it? Since conception. So in and of itself, that means they don't understand. Uh, so the first thing is trying to get appropriate treatment. Now, if you get what, for lack of a better term, if you get pushback in your treatment, if they appear that they really don't either believe you or uh, have the ability to believe you, my recommendation is, if you can, if you can go to another facility. Um, if you cannot, either due to financial circumstances, geographic circumstances, or for any other reason, then you need to establish um, a request to get someone that appears to have some knowledge about your complaints. Whether, because a lot of times the frontline people in emergency rooms are nurses, and they're nurses aides, they're nurses, they're paraprofessionals, they may be doing testing. So you need to get to someone that has skills to address this. You may need to ask for either a head nurse or um, a junior. Normally on the medical side, you're dealing with interns and residents first. They do have a few um, full-fledged, so to speak, physicians or doctors. And many of the institutions that have emergency rooms are training hospitals. That's what they do. They have these younger people that don't have a breadth of knowledge, don't have depth of experience, and so we need to start asking questions. Now, a case for essentially what we would call malpractice is a long ways away. And so you may start out, you may have a complaint, but the first thing is get your care. Get the best you can at that facility. It may not be perfect, but get care, which generally means get relief. Whether it be through IV fluids, um, pain medication, uh, sometimes antibiotics, but get relief. Next, um, when you present and you're signing the paperwork, ask for copies of all of your paperwork. They normally have a white one, a yellow one, a pink one. Get a copy. That will help establish where you were and the basics of your situation. When you get transferred, if you get a bid, and I mean a bed in the emergency room, and it's not in a hallway, you will generally see on the wall some information about that facility. And one of the things you will see is quote unquote patient rights. Um, you can look it over, but many times you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be in pain. You're not going to be thinking about it. But to have someone take a picture of the patient rights, I can assure you, no one in the emergency room has read the patient rights. They have no idea of what the patient's rights are. Because I've had that happen to me when I've asked for something and they've said, well, what do you mean? I said, it's right there on the wall. It's patient rights. Oh, we haven't read that. You know, well, at that point, it's time to try to get the head nurse. Because if they don't even know what your rights are, they can't really treat you. So that is the beginning of trying to show that you have a complaint. First thing, though, get treatment.
Okay, get treatment. So get your pain under control to the degree that you can. And I just want to interject, if you also need advocacy to be able to reach out, of course, if you're in California, reach out to Cayenne Wellness Center, your community health worker who knows how to get a hold of us, and or access advocacy. If you're out of the state, as many of you are, hopefully you can connect with your um, CBO that's in your state and follow those that uh, whatever those protocols are for in your state to get advocacy. So get treatment to the best that you can, and if you need advocacy, contact your CBO in your state. That's number one. Next.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Is advocacy or um, uh, you can ask if things are going uh, poorly for the hospital's ombudsman or patient advocate
Yes.
or um, uh, there are a couple of other names, possibly even a hospital patient social worker.
Yes. That is correct.
And um, if you can get their attention. But normally that involves um, getting out of the emergency room and into the an admission to the facility. But those are options. Is to if you're having trouble actually just getting treatment, you can try to get an advocate to help you. That's one point. If you want to frighten them a great deal, ask not the orderly, not the nursing assistant, but a nurse. And if you can get lucky enough to get a physician type, a resident, ask them, what is the standard of care for my presentation?
Okay.
That frightens everyone because standard of care means they are going to be held to what your good, reasonable doctor would do. Not what they want to do, not what they think, not what they think you need, but what is the standard of care?
Okay. So, number two, ask them what is the standard of care for a person with sickle cell, diagnosed with sickle cell disease, given my presentation?
I had written it almost like that. What is the standard of care for someone who presents like me?
Okay. So let me piggyback on that, because sometimes when you go to the ER or the ED, they're only looking at thinking that you're coming in for pain and you want pain medication. But sometimes they have to understand that we're more than the pain. Therefore, I recall someone who wasn't really going in for that, was having other difficulties. And it wound up that they needed to do what's called a differential diagnosis based upon her symptoms to find out. And in essence, her kidneys were failing. But again, they hear sickle cell triggers, oh, pain medication triggers drug addict, triggers will give you less than what you normally ask for, but missing other symptoms that you're going in for, because that's unfortunately where mortality can set in without thinking about other symptoms, such as if you're complaining, this is not the, and we share with warriors, please state that this is not like my normal presentation. I know what that pain feels like. This is far different than that. And I want you all to use those different terminologies and say that can you do a differential diagnosis on what else might be happening? Use terminology that that they understand as well, because I think looking beyond is going to be very helpful. It may not just be pain; it may be something else going on.
That's a very good point. Um, Getting the staff to actually um, understand what you are saying, and you may not have these words in your vocabulary that you normally use. So you may want to write them down, put them on a little card, put them in your wallet. And you have a few notes. When I go to the emergency room, just like you would say, in case of emergency, contact Mary Jones. Because they're going to ask you, who else can we contact? So when you put down standard of care, either a differential diagnosis or, because that's a really fancy one, but uh, basically the doctors, that means, and there's another term, rule out. They want to check to see if you have symptoms that may be one thing or the other. So they want to go down their little mental and physical checklist to see, no, it can't be this because he has X. Or maybe it is because both situations have certain very similar symptoms. But we've got to figure out what the difference is. And
Exactly.
meanwhile, time is precious for you.
Yes, it is. Most definitely.
Time is very precious. So, um, uh, I've been in situations, unfortunately, where I had to spend, and I don't have sickle cell, but I've had a few other things where I've had to spend my entire 3-day visit in the emergency room. They didn't have a bed. So your treatment is going to be driven by in the emergency room.
Yes.
So it is important. Once, uh, just as a little side note, standard of care is what a bunch of doctors at some big universities have figured out what you should do in certain situations. These guys have a bunch of degrees and letters behind their name. So, and so everybody else has to learn what these guys have figured out. And when you ask, what's the standard of care? They all know they need to start running to the books, because that is a question and a situation where everybody understands. It's like football. Everybody understands the rules.
Okay. So can I add one more thing too?
Sure.
Standard of care, and we also share again with warriors. Maybe we can even interject standard of care based upon evidence-based information from NHLBI and ASH. They've already put together guidelines. ASH, American Society of Hematology, NHLBI, National Heart, Blood, Lung, NHLBI, yes, lung. And so they already have evidence based care that's already written. So I think interjecting that as well. What I did want to say, I'm looking at the time. I do want us to um, see if there's any questions, transition, because we actually do have a couple of warriors who are going to share their story and for you to um, be able to hear that. So let's look at, okay, see if there's any questions and then wonderful. So and Art Grant stated this as well. Ruling out differential diagnosis is also the same as ruling out. You may present with some symptoms that state that you're having a, vaso-occlusive crisis, and you might be, um, but they have to rule out if there's something else. So, say you're saying that you have, uh, you feel pressure on your chest, but we don't know if that's acute chest syndrome, pneumonia, or anything else. So, ruling out or doing a differential diagnosis to see what it might be is very helpful. I say that because most times when you present to the hospital, they only see you as one thing. And we want you to advocate for yourself, for them to think beyond the one thing. You didn't just come in just for pain. This pain presents differently. So please, let's rule out, or you figure out a differential diagnosis for what I'm coming in for. Am I having a pulmonary emboli? Is there this acute chest syndrome, which is very, very um, can be fatal if it's not treated? If this is kidney issues, in which one person wound up having to had dialysis, and so think beyond the pain is what we're asking them to do. All right, so I think Art, if we could transition, we're going to come back because this is what it's about, these legal implications. But I think it's time to have your guests come on and for the two of you to discuss further these legal implications in sickle cell disease based upon her presentation. Do we want to bring on the first guest?
Yeah, I would like to, yeah, Chevron. And we spoke a little earlier, but before we get started with her, the one other point I would make, which can be very helpful either for a complaint or a claim, is make sure they are writing what's going on, either your conversations or your notes. Make sure they're putting it in the chart. The
Oh,
chart normally is at the end of the bed or on the wall at the door. And if you don't see much action going on with your chart, ask them to put it in the chart, because the chart will control and rule once you leave the hospital, whether it be for an internal review, whether it be for a legal claim, whether it be for a state board. The
Yes.
chart is where it's controlled. So you want to make sure
Yeah.
that information, particularly what you want, and sometimes I'll even say, would you please put in the chart, patient request.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay,
Well,
Chevron.
well, hold on. So that's a good
Okay.
point. Make sure that they're putting it in writing, but also, and I've said this for the last 23 years, please keep a journal. Please record even before you go into the hospital, because you want to have, the more accurate you are, and you can look at your book and you can say, the last time I was in was this day based upon pain here. This is what was done. That's a good thing. You want to be able to go back. But also, whenever you're in, you want to be able to record what's going on, even from how frequently you're getting the pain medication to who's treating you. So you want to get names and make sure that you can take a picture of the board that has the name of the nurse and the charge nurse, and even ask who the resident is who's seeing you and the attending as well. So thank you for that. One more thing, and then we'll turn back to this. Go back to Chez Briand is so there was a project called Project PEEP that Sickle Cell Community Consortium was awarded a grant from, at the time, GBT for the Excel grant. Cayenne Wellness Center partnered, as well as Lisa Rose and Coretta Jenrette. And if the staff can put that up briefly, um, this is where, and we'll put it in the chat, this is where you can go to also learn more about hospital infrastructure, as well as how to file a complaint. And this is not in terms of, this is just in terms of knowing the hierarchy. And so we did this during the Warrior Convention. It is available to you all. These are modules. You can go over, again and again to learn the difference between JCO, Joint Commission of Accrediting Hospitals, what a nurse, and the hierarchy of those nurses, physicians, etc. Just wanted to let you all know that there is a module that's available. And now we'll transition to Chez Briand and Art, and the tech team will put the link into the chat for you all to check that out. All right. Welcome, Chez Briand.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so, can you introduce yourself to the community? Although I think most of us know you, but if you can introduce.
Well, hello everyone. I am Chez Briand Howard, aka Chez Briand the Advocate. I'm a filmmaker, photographer, graphic designer, author, overall creative being. I use my creativity to bring awareness and education to sickle cell and mental health advocacy. I am also the child of a sickle cell patient. My mother passed away from complications of sickle cell when she was just 25 and I was 7. And I have a beautiful 9-year-old sickle cell trait warrior here who is also a mini advocate. She does her own advocacy by hosting a sickle cell children's support group online called The Village Kids. So that is something that we're really proud of as well. And yeah, that is who I am.
Wonderful. Okay, Chevrian, we talked a little earlier, and you related your kind of recent contacts, I'll call them, with the healthcare community. And you just briefly want to do an outline, and you mentioned that you're an advocate. So why don't you, briefly start with, Texas, and then where you are now.
Okay. Well, I just moved from Texas a month ago, so it's still fresh. I had a very weird, very wicked uh, time in Texas, mainly because the treatment there was very bad. I don't want to sugarcoat anything, so I'm just going to be very honest with what I'm talking about and what I went through, because it is something that people probably are going through right now. And just know you don't have to deal with that type of treatment. While I was in Texas for 5 years, I had my kidneys decline over time because of the mistreatment that I had. They kept knowingly giving me the wrong fluids, and that in turn diminished my kidney function greatly, and it ultimately ended up with me needing dialysis. I am on dialysis now. I've had some hospitalizations where, one in particular, I was mistreated to the point where they rushed a blood transfusion or tried to, and it ultimately ended up bruising my arm permanently because it's still bruised, and that happened a year ago. Um, and with visits to two separate hospitals on two separate occasions, I've dealt with being misdiagnosed, mistreated, purposely withholding medication, purposely withholding care. I've literally been told by a nurse that I'm a Black girl in America, and I have to do what the doctors say, or they're going to have any reason to kill me. A nurse really told me that. So it was a very crazy situation, and I myself am not the type of person that deals with mistreatment well from on any standards. So I know, the ways to report doctors, and I have gone through proper steps most of the time, but it's still, most of it. Sometimes there were things that happened. The doctors end up having to leave the hospital sometimes, but there were times that that was not the case, and I had to keep dealing with the same doctor to the point where the hospital themselves had to make sure every time I was to get directly admitted that I would not get put with that specific doctor's team. And it was very difficult to deal with, especially dealing with doctors who didn't know much about sickle cell. It was not very many sickle cell patients where I was at. Even if there was, the treatment was still poor. So ultimately, it led to me moving to Vegas to pursue better options for care. And it was something that I knew ultimately that it was either that, or to me, I felt like my life was in jeopardy. So if I didn't move, then I probably wouldn't be here today, honestly.
Okay. I think you have, presented or given us a good rundown of the different options because you've pursued some. The one thing that you told me was that over the 5-year period of poor fluid management, your kidney function declined to 3%. And
Yes,
that's what forced you on to dialysis. So
correct.
you show that you had poor treatment. From the poor treatment, you had complaints, and you worked the um, hierarchy and system to the point where the facility knew that the people that weren't following the standard of care should not treat you.
Correct. Yes.
Now what you haven't pursued but technically you could. You could look at a claim because you actually have what the law calls damages. Your kidney function has been damaged to the point of where you told me you are eligible to pursue a transplant list status. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
So you would need to get a donor. You would need to have hospitalization and medical care for surgery. You would have quote unquote pain and suffering behind it. And you would require probably, immunotherapy for possible rejection for the rest of your life. So that could be the basis of a claim. So you went from complaint and complaining to a potential claim. And so that's a good example of you have a claim. Now, if you want to pursue it, that's a whole nother um, uh, piece of work, an activity to do. Finding a lawyer, finding expert witnesses that would say, yes, your care was below the standard. That standard resulted in harming the kidneys to the point of where they didn't function. But that's a good example of where your care crossed over from just complaining about the care to actually having a claim.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mhm.
All right. And uh, you have been the full distance. Now, along the way, you call yourself the advocate in the institution in, I think you told me El Paso.
Yes.
In El Paso, did you find any advocates in the institution that
No.
helped you? What,
No.
how did you get the institution to recognize that this doctor was so bad that they wanted to make sure that you didn't, quote unquote, get admitted to his team?
They had what you call patient experience. It wasn't really an advocate. They were the go-between, and they established basically avoiding me in that specific team. So there was only one time someone accidentally put me on that team, and patient experience had to come and uh, speak with the doctor and change everything to give me to a different team.
Well, that's a good point. So patient experience was an office that tried to essentially manage um, the care of patients and the
Yes.
response of patients. And
Yes.
so, in order for patient experience to be able to do something and address your situation, we get back to what was in the chart. And
Mhm.
this is why it's important that charting be done. And if necessary, you ask them, make sure it's in the chart because they took that chart to other doctors and asked them, do we have a problem? And they probably said, yes, you have a problem. And this patient has legitimate issues. And team one doesn't appear to be able to address them. So,
So, Art, can I
but
ask a question for Shabrion? When did you follow the complaint? In other words, obviously, it was before they put team one with you went to team one when you should have gone to someone else. How much time had passed when you had actually filed that first complaint?
So this happened last year around this time. I went to so I go to the hospital every couple of months for blood exchange. So I want to say I probably went back in, say, September, August time, around that time, probably September, October, around that time. And that was when I was accidentally put with the same team, but they changed rather quickly because they realized I was not going for it. So that
But,
was one of the
but
things.
when had you filed your complaint? I'm assuming it was before they had put you with the wrong team.
Yeah, so it was June 2022.
Okay. So a year ago you filed the complaint. So that
Mhm.
complaint now is recorded, and so they have that now on record.
Yes.
And
Now,
I'm assuming Art as well. Once it's on record, then that complaint follows her. Um, what was the end result of the complaint?
The end result was just basically like keeping them away from me, not letting them treat me, not letting them handle my care in any way, shape, or form, and just pretty much separating us for forever, pretty much, because I was not. There was, however, one of the doctors that was on that team that switched to another team that I had. Probably it was actually the last visit I had in May before I left. He ended up on a different team, and he ended up on my care, but he was very different on that team. So um, I suppose he had a different change of heart, I guess, from where he was acting and treating me before to where he ended. So that's a good thing that came out of that. I saw with my own eyes that he was actually willing to do better, which is good. But that
now,
was only one person on the team, so it doesn't really
well,
make up for what they did.
you raised 2 points. One is Dr. Raleigh asked, does that follow you? Normally, I would say that the hospital would not chart that because they don't want to make that admission. I mean, you would not have um, you would not have that do not, this patient cannot be assigned to this team or these doctors. That would normally not be in the chart because if it went to a claim stage, big flags. So that the hospital would more or less track it internally. Number one. Number two, I would say, as I said before, when you complained and they pulled your chart and had it reviewed, they probably were told they needed to do some physician education. And that brought about this change in behavior and attitude from this one doctor that you then encountered
Yes.
because they were probably told. And one of the things that happens in hospitals that we have not talked about at all is there is a unit called risk management. That's a code word for lawsuits. And risk management can drive a lot of medical care because they're looking for situations that can result in lawsuits because lawsuits can be very expensive. So if they get a doctor reviewing it, and then the risk management unit has a doctor that's assigned to it, and he reviews it, and they look at it, then they can tell the MD chain at the facility, we have a problem. And if you want to save some money, we need to do some corrective action and some training. And so those are things that occur on that back end. And so, fortunately for you, you were able to see, we might say, that this doctor came to Jesus, but he probably had a conversation with, a couple of people that pointed out to him in the medical world how things should be done. And the last thing, doctors take an oath that says, do no harm. And if they find out they're doing harm, then they have broken that oath. And that's not a good thing.
So, a couple of questions. So, Shay Brion, you filed a complaint in June, and did you file? And I think, like Art was saying, get your care first and then file the complaint. Is that what you did? Make sure you were
Yes.
out and felt better, and then moved through the ranks to
Yes, I
file.
did. Well, I filed the complaint through the hospital while I was there. I did tell them to record in my chart because I am knowledgeable. So that is in my chart actually, which made it easier for most of the patient experience. People who didn't know the situation, I could call and say, hey, they gave me this team. I'm not supposed to have them, or just make sure I don't have this team. And instead of not knowing what I was talking about, it everything was recorded. I made sure they did that because I didn't want it to happen again, pretty much. And I was very thorough. I also made sure my own hematologist recorded what happened in the chart with him, and on his side of things, and told him what happened. And again, his office and the hospital worked together to make sure I wouldn't deal with those same doctors or have the same situation. Now, I've had other situations occur with different doctors, but it wasn't nearly as well. It wasn't as critical, should I say, as what happened. I just was able to. The difference between that team and the other doctors I had that I was able to get rid of when things occurred was the specific team that was over my care that specific time. They would not give my case to anybody else, and they discharged me. So they basically used retaliation tactics on me because I was speaking up for myself. So that's what I made them record everything. I made them record the fact that they took my meds away from me right after that happened, everything. So it's all there.
I want to bring our attention to some of the questions that are coming up right now, and then we get back to hearing more about. I have a couple of questions, but there are a couple of questions. I'm just going to let the tech team know which one first. You mentioned risk management. I do want to get back to that once we review. Pat Corley says sometimes a physician, if the tech team can do that one, sometimes a physician may not agree with others on team, but has to go along. He may have parted with that team and landed on team where he had more power and felt safe to share his true beliefs. Um, and that does happen from time to time. I want to do Francis Baker's question in a second because I don't want to do the risk management yet. Um, when you say record, Shabrion, do you mean noted in the chart? So can you, because when we use the word record, and that's another thing, Art, gosh, there's so many things to talk about. Some people think record means that you have your phone and you're video
Mhm.
recording. Um, when I say record, I mean taking notes. But I think Tabitha is asking, what did you mean by it? And then Art, if you can share what's legal, because I think there's a legal component of quote recording. Shabrian?
Okay, so I believe I do actually have some physical recording of it. I would have to go back. That situation was very hectic, and I was very sick at the time, so I would have to go back in my phone. But when I say record, I actually meant in my chart. So they had to put it. They had to notate my chart. Everything I wanted them to notate everything from that point because it all started with me asking to get a test um, for because I was coughing up yellow mucus and they were trying to discharge me. So I was just asking to get a test before I leave. And it started there and it escalated very quickly to something it didn't have to. And everything was notated. And I don't even think that specific lead doctor is at that hospital anymore either. So it I reported them on, I think, what is it, health grade, something. But I also, like I said, everything went through the hospital first. And then when I felt better, that's when I went and reported it um, separately as well.
Normally, when we say record or note, we mean to the chart because the chart controls normally, unless there's some extraordinary um, circumstances, as I said. So that's why when the patient experience or the advocate, they will, you know, get access to the chart and take it to the uh, chief of staff or someone and say we have a problem or we have a complaint, and they will form a little committee and maybe even if they have to call some boys down the road from another hospital and say, hey, would you look at our chart?
Yeah.
Uh, and we want to get an outside opinion. So record means to the chart. Um, that's one point. Rec- recording um, recording someone with a machine uh, normally requires the consent of the party that you are recording. Just like when somebody calls you up and they go real fast, and we're going to use this for training and experience. Um, and you go, wait a minute, but they are trying to get to tell you that they're going to do it, but for you not to recognize that they are doing it. And now let's talk after I told you I'm going to record it. Um, so, be very careful. There are times where you may feel that you need to record, but you know you are breaking some laws. But it is very, very important. And by example, I told someone that they had put some racist notes in a patient's chart. and no black workers on Ward 2F. And I said, you got to be kidding. Oh, no, it's there. We have a post-it on the wall. I said, you got to bring me the post-it. She took it down, brought it into my office. She said, well, it's in the chart too. I said, I explained very carefully. Under HIPAA and the rules, you cannot, take patient's chart or patient's records. I said, but we got to have this. I had it in my back pocket. And when things came down, I was able to say it to the other side. I can't show you this, but I can assure you I am. And everybody understood because they knew it was in the chart. It was charted. So my point is, there are times when you may have to break one rule because you're trying to prove another. And I'm not going to tell you to do it. And I'm not going to help you. But I'm just letting you know that it may be important.
But
So,
is it admissible? So if it winds up being a claim, is it then admissible because you did not get their permission?
and let me just say, it can be. Um, you know, it, it, if the records are subpoenaed in a lawsuit, a judge would allow it. If you're trying to show discrimination and there's evidence of discrimination, then they can't just say, "Oh no, we can't release that."
Okay.
So,
And so I asked that, Art, because there is a question saying, are video recordings allowed if all parties didn't consent to the recording? So that is the same question that I asked. And I think Pat Crowley is saying the same thing. Is it legal to record without informing the person you're recording?
well, there are two situations. One, I would say, is it legal to record if you're in a small person situation? It depends. Number one, it depends upon the state law. So, first thing we would have to do is check on the state law. Number two, in California, it is not legal. Okay. Um, but and then number three, if you are in a group situation, not a small one-on-one, one-on-two, but you've got 15 people or 20 people, and you just take a picture or you scan your camera. I went to this meeting and these people were there. Then there's no expectation of privacy. One of the issues is going to be, did people expect there to be privacy?
So using what you're saying, without getting consent, we're going to use California. In California, it is not legal. Uh, However, I hear what you're saying. If there's evidence of discrimination, then the judge might allow that, or the attorney may say this is admissible or what have you. But in general, um, recording and not getting consent is not legal. But there may be extenuating circumstances where it would be allowed, uh, to, particularly if it shows discrimination and or, and I'm using the and or, um, if it violates a patient rights.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, but let's say you're in the reception area at the emergency room, and there are people running in, people running out, orderlies, and security guards, and you just take a pan. That would not be illegal. So, depending upon what you're trying to show. But again, if the nurse is at your bedside and it's you and the nurse, then that's a different situation.
Yes, and that happens.
However, If people try to say something didn't happen, and you have the recording to show that you asked for something and you begged and pleaded and they refused, and then ball game's off at that point. Okay? So there are rankings in the legal situation. Now, you wouldn't use it to prove your claim, but you could use it to dispute theirs.
So I said to the last part, you can use it to prove your claim, but you can use it to pursue what?
You couldn't use it initially to prove your claim,
Oh,
but if they claimed that it didn't happen, you could use it to disprove their statement.
I see. Wow. So this is getting, uh, there's the and or if type of statement that are taking place.
Right.
If we,
So, if they're going to sit up there and tell a story, you're allowed to say, "Well, wait a minute. No, I have something. Is this your voice on the recording? And does that sound like you? And the recording has a date on it. Were you in that patient's room on that date? Okay.
yes. Can we go back?
So,
Can we go back to risk management? Because that's
yeah,
something that there's several questions, and I had a question, and I wanted to lay this back to Shay Brion. So, uh, risk management. So, regarding Shay Brion, she was filing her complaint while she was in the hospital. You stated she can probably pursue a claim, a
claim.
claim. But now let's talk about risk management. At what point does a warrior and their family bring that up? At the claim portion, once they're out, I understand it, but how do we leverage it? This risk management. How is that leverage for on our behalf?
See, normally we would not bring up risk management for the normal patient. But if I were in, you could bring it up in, a conversation of, has risk management looked at this? That would be the question.
So for Shay Brion and filing her complaint while she was there, did you know about risk management? Has that ever been a conversation, Shay Brion?
I'm not sure specifically because there were other people from different parts of the hospital that came and spoke with me on different occasions. So it could have possibly been risk management. I'm not going to sit here and lie that I knew for sure it was or not. I could only tell you that I went through the proper channels. I asked for, I leveled each, escalated each to the proper level that I knew to, and I also spoke with the congresswoman in El Paso about it as well. So she was aware of it. Listen, I did as much as I could do. I really did. So that is why I ultimately left, because it was not changing what good enough. Like it was either put myself on the line as a martyr in that space and potentially end up on the other side, or just kind of leave that situation and save my own life and go from there. So again, as I stated, I'm not sure. I'm not gonna say no. I'm not gonna say yes either because I'm just not quite sure.
So I heard a couple of things, which we also recommend too. You brought in your legislative person,
Yeah.
and so we recommend that as well. But going back to risk management, I'm looking at some of these. So Art, if you can go to the comment section so that you can see, you'll have to just click to comments. So there's quite a bit of information that people are saying. Pat Corley says the hospital invites risk management in to protect themselves. So that's interesting with my question of when do we bring that up? So maybe we don't. Someone else said, if I can go up a little bit, risk management, going all the way back. There's a question about risk management that I wanted to go back to. Oh, Francine Baker. Risk management is another key word to mention when not receiving appropriate medical care. What would risk management think about the care being provided? And that was at 11:54. Yeah. So I'm getting the impression, but Art, you can help clear this up. Is that a term that we even want to state? Um, like Francine Baker is saying, what would risk management think about the care being provided? That's something that should be stated during that process of a complaint, after the complaint.
No, I believe that, I mean, at the point that, like Chebrion said, you've already had a lot of frustration, you are complaining, and they were discharging her. So that encounter is about over in everyone's mind. And if you are complaining to them about your care and the adequacy of your care and the management of your care, um, it, the relationship, so to speak, is pretty much broken down. But you want to give them a chance. You're essentially giving them a chance to clean up their act by asking, well, has risk management looked at this? Because sometimes the staff, and when I say staff, I mean the head nurses and the physicians, get so headstrong that they don't want to be challenged. They're always, dealing with difficult patients. They're dealing with people that are, under stress, have problems, uh, won't take their meds. They have a hard job. I'll concede that. But so they sometimes don't back up when they're challenged because they're used to it's going to be this way, buddy. You're going to get up, you're going to exercise, you're going to do this, you're going to take these meds. We're not going to negotiate a bunch. I got 4 other patients on the board I have to deal with. So sometimes they get, if you use a word, headstrong. And so my point is, at that point, your relationship is pretty strained. So I don't have any concerns. You could even ask them to put it in the chart. Patient requested us to have risk management review this. Because basically, risk management means some administrative type getting the chart and going to another doctor.
right. And so I'm going to play the other role here because I was reading I think what Pat said. So risk management though works for the hospital.
Absolutely.
Now we know that they want to, uh, you know, lower their risk of a lawsuit, but they are working for the hospital. Is
Right.
that so? Is that still for our benefit? Because
Yes.
wonderful. I'm sure
Yes.
that it was going to come up, and so it's still because now we have a person who we can contact. We've asked them to now they're involved, um, and it sounds like that would be a next segue if the complaint didn't. Sometimes Warrior would say, "I've actually made a complaint and nothing came of it." So in that respect, because nothing came of it, had they gotten others involved, could they move this now up the chain? But what would be the next steps? They tried to do the complaint, or they did do the complaint. Nothing came of it. Nothing. What did they do?
Okay. Now, it's a good point. Risk management works for the hospital, whether it's in-house or it's a company that does it. What we are trying to do, the whole nature of the exercise at this point is to get adequate, competent care. So risk management works for the hospital. And what you're asking the hospital to do is please listen to somebody that's going to follow the standard of care. That's all you're asking. Is
Okay.
I want to get someone that's going to follow the standard of care.
Of care. Thank you. Okay.
And, whether it be a doctor on team B or, uh, you know, uh, whatever. So I would prefer, I mean, we're trying to just get somebody within the hospital structure to do the right thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, uh, because the ultimate goal is to get the best treatment you can for your circumstances.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank. That was something new. And then, Shay Brian, so where are you now? I know that when we first started, Art said that it looked like you have you can move on to the next level, a claim. But where are you right now? Well, obviously you've moved to a new state, and what do you think of his suggestion? And where are you now?
Well, excuse me. Well, personally, I've just been trying to get myself back on track health wise. I have actually reached out to lawyers before in Texas, and it was pretty much like I didn't die, so whoopsie, oh well. And that was pretty much the response I got from most of the lawyers that I contacted, which was very disheartening. It was kind of like, wow, okay, so, well, all right. It pretty much, I am willing to take this further, of course, but I just have to find the right person for the job. So
So,
far, I have not had any luck.
well, let me interrupt because I've heard that. So, Art, this does happen. She's doing, as you can tell, Shay Brian is a person that follows through. So, what's your thoughts and suggestion as to locating that particular? How do we find an attorney that will take this on, that sees, you're hearing this and you're saying, yep, this is definitely something to move forward. How does one locate a lawyer that will take this on?
Uh, Medical negligence lawyers are, a specialized area. And basically, in your region. You know, if you're in a big city, that's one thing. But if not, in your region, you need to locate a lawyer. In your case, you'd need to locate someone that was in Texas. And that gets to be another problem. But that handles medical negligence, that would look at your case. First thing you would need to do is get your chart, get a copy of your chart, because they're going to need to have it reviewed. And then you go from there. But so contact your what would we call trial lawyers. Those are the people that represent people, not the defense lawyers that represent the hospitals. So you would contact the trial lawyer organization for the state of Texas or the big town around El Paso and go from there. You know, so some offer, you know, a free phone consultation, some offer, so you give them a brief sketch, but if you have your chart, that's where everyone wants to start. So that's why it's important that we make sure our chart is stuffed full of things before we go to the lawyer.
So a trial lawyer, medical negligence. Are there, lack of a better word, agencies, or there's so many? Is there a way to find those who specialize, or is it just a matter of calling one by one? Uh, is there another? You know, we live in the 21st century now, but some things I think are still you have to call. I'm just
Well,
curious.
the first thing I would do is I would use your basic Google search. Medical negligence attorney, you know, Texas, Dallas, Houston, and then from there you can either go to their websites or you could call. You know, so that's what I would do. And you know, then also what I'm finding more so is when you try to do your search, there are going to be a ton of ads before you can actually get to the results for your search. So see what the ads also offer.
And so, Shabrion, is that what? Can you share with everyone? Is that what you've done, or what steps have you um, taken so far?
Yeah, it was a Google search. So I did the El Paso area, then I kind of extended it to the state of Texas, different lawyers around the state of Texas. And no luck yet. But,
Well,
you know,
the one thing I would say is that yes, normally you either want someone that has severe consequences, or and I'm not trying to wish this, or they've passed away. Um, Now you do have, uh, you know, catastrophic kidney damage. So if the lawyer is sensitive enough, meaning uh, to recognize that the poor treatment resulted in the loss of a kidney, and they're good enough to do it, they would have something to work with. That's all I'm going to say. Um, the catastrophic piece, I will say, I told this story last time of a patient that had sickle cell, went into crisis, got admitted. Doctors were giving her morphine, and she complained. Complained. Gave her morphine. Complained. Gave her morphine. Complained. Another doctor comes on the shift, gives her morphine. She got to the point of where she was toxic, and she seized because of the morphine. The result of the seizure was the seizure broke both her hips and both her shoulders. She was a nurse. That was a catastrophic injury. And we handled it. Unfortunately, some of these states have caps on how much a patient can get. We got the maximum, but my point is that um, that's what lawyers are looking for: catastrophic, you know, injuries. Um, so bad treatment, and when I say treatment, I mean care alone isn't a lawsuit. But when you have consequences, and I think you have severe consequences, you know, uh, that's when you move from a complaint to a claim. Do we want to bring in Nia, or is she available?
Let's see if Nia's here. I haven't heard from our, our tech team that she's arrived, but definitely it's been on Nia. She's arrived. I did, while we're waiting to see, I did want to ask, so medical discrimination, that was the title for today as well.
Right.
So I did want to um, make sure that we covered that in terms of what is medical discrimination. So there's so many things that we talked about. The patient rights. Take a picture, you all, when you are in the hospital. Just take a picture of it, and at some point you can see if that was violated. But where does medical discrimination come into play?
It gets back to what Chevron was basically saying, that obviously the team that she wound up with initially did not believe her and did not know how to treat or manage sickle cell. Uh, now, um, medical discrimination is very subtle, you know, but basically it means that either for financial reasons or uh, bias reasons, um, patient respect reasons, people are not given. It all comes back to the standard of care. It all comes back to the standard of care. And so if people are not treating, okay, African Americans and Africans all have the possibility, high possibility, of sickle cell if you're going to get it. And if people basically don't manage the uh, the treatment according to the standard of care, then they are discriminating, because doctors have said this is how you manage this condition. If
So
you have,
so
go
medical
ahead.
medical discrimination can even occur in the waiting room if they're waiting 5 hours and they see others go in before them and they don't have a gunshot wound or heart attack or have a stroke. So how do we how do we get um, our warriors to start tracking whether it's even happening um, before they're even seen that they're waiting?
Um, well, if again, it gets back to note taking. Uh, if they have gone to the same facility and every time they go, it's 5 hours, or it's an inordinate amount of time, where they've seen a number of people go in, the issue then becomes, have they ranked this patient's complaints so lowly that, as you said, we have a gunshot wound, a GSW. Uh, we have a heart attack that comes in on a stretcher. We have you know, a compound fracture. So, that is not going to be necessarily easy to track because they're trying to prioritize their resources based upon what's going on. So, um, uh, we we want to just make sure, and it's not easy for our population to keep notes, but we want to encourage that. The other thing I wanted to say before this was over was that um, we need to make sure that um, patients with sickle cell know they periodically are going to need medical support. Know that. So go to the facilities you think you're going to get care from when you're not in crisis and check it out so you have a plan. So that when you do present, you're familiar with the facility. Understand what they want. If you've been before, just get familiar. So if you believe you've had problems, or if you anticipate you're going to have problems, bring a notepad. You're probably going to be, like Chevron said, it was crazy. There were a lot of things going on when she showed up. So you need to have someone else with you that you have briefed, you have asked to, please, look, I'm going to be bent over. I'm not going to be taking notes. So I need to have you to take the notes, have you to take the pictures. Um, and if I ask you to take a picture, you'll know what that
And
means.
so let me.
Hello.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
I think Carolyn's having some production challenges.
All right. I'm not sure if it's me or if it's Art and Shay Beyond. Um, so sorry for the technical issues. Um, I don't know if it's me and if I'm interrupting people speaking or not. I apologize if I am. But you all, Art and Shay Beyond, you all were gone. So, okay. It looks like everybody is back. So sorry for that brief stall. I have to say, Art, I didn't hear. Maybe everyone else did. Would you mind repeating? Because your screen went black on my end as well as Shay Brion. So it could have been my difficulties. I'm not at the office right now. But do you mind repeating?
Well, was basically, I believe the last comments is to go to the facility you believe you're going to use or go to. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But I did go over to the comments section, and one comment or kind of ask was, is there a different standard of care for, if they put African Americans, Black people? Um, no, there is not a different standard of care. The standard of care is presented, um, is developed based upon the presentation. Now, the fact that we have a standard of care for sickle cell is that it is Black people. So you don't discover this condition in many other ethnic groups. So the standard of care is based upon the patient presentation, not the race, not where their grandmothers were born or anything else. That was one question. There was another question that I just saw, uh, and it came up on the screen. Um,
Well, while you look for that, I was going to also say, Karen Shea says, can you also ask for a social worker at the hospital? Yes, we invite you to do that as well. Patient experiences, the social worker, we do invite you all to do that as well in terms of an advocate or an ombudsman.
right, yeah, you could do that right off the bat. And many times you can ask the directory for the hospital
Yes.
and get those people. So if you're actually admitted or not,
Yeah.
you can ask for help.
So you said something that I've been stating for over 2 decades as well, not to go alone. I have to say, I understand the challenges that people have, particularly if they don't have a partner or significant other. But we know how difficult it is for you to manage, advocate for yourself to get your pain under control, and record everything. But I'm glad that Art said it, and I'll say it as well, to have someone with you, um, and particularly at the beginning, so they can help advocate, get you what you need. But if someone can just do a tag team, and I said it earlier as well, if you're in California, you can call your CHW, who would then contact myself and Pat Corley. There's also Access Advocacy. If you're in a whole nother state, see if your CBO in your state have advocates to help you as well. Uh, because we don't want you to go alone. There's many reasons. Obvious reason, you're trying to manage pain and get that under control, and yet you're still having to pay attention and record everything and advocate for yourself. So thank you for stating that. Um, all right. There is a question or a statement, I think, from Pat Corley. It's important to advocate for oneself. Um, Not sure what that first word is. Concerns and information in building a case. If I would like to have someone place information of concerns in my chart, I want it added to my chart. Can I ask them to sign for it and guarantee my note be added to the chart as requested by me? How can I ensure my story, concerns, and voice be heard in case I need legal addressing of issues?
Uh, there were 2 points, and I read another point that Pat made. Let me just say, um, one, y- what I pointed out earlier is most important, is request that they make notes in your chart. Patient request the following, or patient stated. So you can ask someone to put something in your chart. They may not put it in your chart, but you need to request that they put in the chart that patient requested a note be put in chart. Then you keep the note because now it's tied to the chart. Here's the note that I asked the nurse to put in, but she wouldn't do it.
I see. Put it
Now,
put it in writing. Is that what you're saying? 'Cause they
yes,
give you paper. You can even write it on a napkin. But
right,
it's okay. But you want to hand it to the nurse, and you record by notation um, that you at 12:41 Pacific time. I handed Nurse Brown to please put this in my chart, my request for what's going on.
right. And normally they wouldn't tape the little napkin in the chart. They
No,
would write what was on the
cor-
napkin into the
correct,
chart.
correct.
Right.
But
Okay.
verbally
Uh,
doesn't. But if he's asked them verbally, um, it's their word against mine. So that's why I'm hearing you say it's probably best to write it, because I can say to Nurse Brown to please put it in my chart, and then they don't.
right.
Do you have proof of that now that that you actually asked it at 12:42?
Well, no, you don't. But that's why you ask them to at least make the entry that patient requested.
But if you do it verbally, there's no it's the patient, sorry, it's the nurse's word against yours that you asked.
That's right. And unless you see them write it in the chart, it is. So
So can you
that's
do
why,
this? Can you do this? Everyone has a recording on their phone. Can I say, I just want to record my asking you to put this in the chart? Can we do that? Now you
you
have a
could,
recording.
you could, and they may run out of the room.
No, but you're not asking them. You're just saying, I'm asking Nurse Brown to put this in my chart. Nurse Brown, can you verify that I'm asking you to put this in my chart?
Yeah, well, yeah, but my point is, if you pulled out your phone and said you're going to record, they're going to take off.
Okay, you're right.
All right. So um, you could ask, but my belief is they're going to put it in the they're going to take off and say, oh, they're going to send the charge nurse or they're going to send the duty nurse, you know, but they're not going to be involved in some charting dispute. Um, so
Well, this is a real issue, Art, because we can ask them, and I just want to find out what is the best way for us to record that we've asked them.
what I would do is just keep a diary. And if you keep a diary of your hospital stay, and it appears to generally be accurate. Most people don't lie about their medical care because they don't know where it's going. So if you had a diary, it would be more believable than not.
I agree. I agree. That's why
Um,
let's make it a habit of quote writing, notating, and it is more um, credible because you've shown that this is what you do. I agree.
right. So, um, and you may come out, great result, no problems. It, but it may go sideways. So if
So,
you just have a diary and every day yeah, I took my pills. Yes, I got 3 shots. I went to the physical, lab, whatever, and people are going to read it. And if you say I asked this, it's going to be more believable than not.
okay. Oh,
Uh, because you're keeping a track record.
okay. So Etta Carter has a question. If a doctor put the wrong diagnosis in the chart, how can you get it out? And if particularly if the doctor left the hospital, that's a good question.
Well, how long after the chart entry is made um, is it spotted and requested? I mean, are we talking 5 years or, upon discharge? Um, Sometimes the wrong diagnosis in the chart may be helpful to showing I didn't get the right care because they were barking up the wrong tree. So, but you can, but to answer the question itself more precisely, you go to the next doctor and that you encounter, and if you point it out, um, either they probably won't change what the last doctor wrote, but they will make a note in their notes that that was a wrong diagnosis. And so, um, uh, you know,
Well, I
so
think that leads to another question, not here, but something that we've encountered at our office. Um, information, um, biased information about a warrior was placed in the notes. How and that warrior doesn't want that biased information in there. And we're not talking about that the first, it's not talking about diagnosis. We're talking about their biased thoughts. And that's placed in there so that someone else now comes in and it shows um, that this person um, uses expletives and threatens, for instance. And perhaps that person did not do that. I'm just, um, I'm trying to think of a real example, but it has occurred that biased information is put in and it wasn't correct. And it follows the warrior and they want it corrected. It's not a diagnosis. Is that at all possible to get that biased information um, to be, I don't know, didactic or
well, expunged, redacted. Yes, I would say that you would then go start with the hospital mediator, that side, to take it to the up the chain to the chief of staff and that side, and then level the complaint. There are certain standards um, uh, for charting, and um, so complaining that it's derogatory information, you know, uh, he appears to be a drug addict, and and maybe some other things. There's certain kinds of information, uh, such as you know, uh, back in the day when um, HIV was very negative, and there was implications that the person, was a carrier, and it was not accurate. That there are certain kinds of negative and derogatory information that, if in the wrong hands, someone subpoenas your medical records, or you're applying for a certain kind of job, and maybe even life insurance. And your records are pulled and they're reviewed by some retired doctor or a doctor that had a heart attack and now can only do certain kinds of things, so they review medical records. It's not a good thing. So you would go to the facility side and point out the problem, and maybe the note was even, at the end of the shift, the person wrote it up and it was the wrong patient.
Yeah.
And, they made chart entries that were wrong.
So it
So
sounds like to me, this is a complaint.
it's initial, yeah, it's a complaint.
So, and you can file a complaint to be able to get your records, um, certain parts of your record, uh,
Expunged
to be,
or
to be, well, you can't really have it deleted, but for it not to, well, as you already said, redacted, so that no one can see that, and therefore that doesn't continue to follow you. Is that
right,
something that a person can, quote, complain and then go through that process?
right.
Perfect. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I would say, I mean, that, like I said, there are ways for your records to get out. You
Okay.
know, um,
So we have a question, and gosh, this has been interesting. We're almost up. We're almost at 1 o'clock. We do have another question, and let me just say this to those of you who are looking at us on through Facebook um, Live or any other social medias. Again, you can put your questions in the chat. People are looking at that, and they'll put that here. The question is, since we know an illegal recording can often be used under one or other legal exceptions or to impeach, wouldn't such a recording statement expedite, bring parties to perhaps settle quickly?
most certainly, that's what it does do. They do not. It may be illegal, but they don't want it to get out that it occurred. So that's absolutely, you know, the case where when you can demonstrate that, you know, um, you know,
Well, let me say,
it's kind of like I said, it was in my back pocket, but I just told them I had it. They could look at their chart and see that it was there,
yes.
and they didn't want to have that conversation.
So let me say this, Art, and I'm not on social media, but I do know that there are times that warriors place things on social medias because they're trying to get assistance. Um, the question is, I think that Darlene raised a great question and you answered it. It can really help to expedite.
A
Uh,
resolution.
but what about if that same person put it on social media? Because that does happen. And I like to get your opinion about that.
Well, I'm like you. I am not on social media, um, and um, the reason I'm not is because if I say anything on social media, the other side of the legal bar would want to use it. So I'm not going to give them something to use.
Okay.
But um, but um, you know, there is very little you can do under quote social media. As we have seen, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are truly the Wild West. And Uh, so um, unless it is egregious, there isn't much practically that can be done.
Well, sometimes um, so I'm recalling one where I don't even remember, but a warrior put something, an interaction of the doctor that was in the room. I saw it. I happened to see it. And then I'm actually glad that the person did. I actually then went to a conference in New York and I recognized that doctor and pulled the doctor aside saying, I saw you. Can we talk? And I didn't care for what they were saying or doing. So part of it is if they're wanting, I think my question kind of stems back not whether or not they should do it, but how will it help or hurt their case for putting it out there already? It's one thing to have it so that you can use that, as Miss Brown was asking, but it's another to put it out there. And that was helpful because I saw that. I recognized the doctor. We had a conversation. So I kind of called the doctor out, but I happened to see it. And and I just brought the doctor's attention that the response, your thinking seemed very punitive and not helpful for this warrior from what I was able to see. So on the one hand, that was people were aware, but on the other, I don't want it to harm them if they want to move forward with complaint or claim. And that was kind of where that was going. Can that actually um, be used against them, or the fact that they have it recorded and it is egregious? It was actually punitive. It was punitive.
Well, uh, I would say that if what was posted was supportive of the claim, then it's not going to hurt the claim. To use an earlier person's um, comment, it will help expedite the resolution of the claim because again, there's certain standards of care. And no one wants to get called upon. In that case, if it's a doctor, um, a medical board being informed, they do an investigation, and you know they don't want to spend time and money on things like that. And in your case, I mean, it was hopefully a learning experience for them. But so I, now it can be the reverse. If someone's making a claim, I had a case, I don't want to tell war stories, but I had a case, someone claimed they were hurt and injured. And the woman's boyfriend had posted some things on social media that didn't seem to be very helpful for the hurt and injury. So there, it had a negative. So depending upon which side the social media content is,
Yes, makes
will
sense.
determine um, that issue.
Thank you. We are at 1 o'clock. We've had a great conversation. If we can bring Shay Brion back, um, I would. Oh, okay. So I'm reading that she did have to leave. We did want to have her just share a summary, but Art, I'm going to have you um, I don't think there's any other questions at the moment. So, Art, this was great. Another great learning session. Can you give us some pearls of wisdom to leave us with until next time?
Well, really, I think we sum it up with first, you want to get care, you want to get better. If you encounter situations that you believe are impeding that, you want to document. And you document by keeping notes, taking pictures of important or things that are around you, charts, names, dates, um, and uh, then um, as you're recovering, as you're able to get some medication and become stable, then you make your determinations as to whether or not you believe your care is adequate, your care is appropriate. And if you don't think so, always ask, what is the standard of care for what you're treating me for? Um, and uh, that puts people on their back feet to think, I haven't heard those words since medical school. It must be important. And so that's what we want to do. We don't want to have complaints. We don't want to have claims. We want to get better. But if we do, we want to keep notes.
Thank you. We
Thank
have
you.
we have one final comment and suggestion. Pat Corley, find a way to remember what you ask to people you encounter when in contact with the healthcare provider. When I advocated for my sister, I had a sign-in sheet for people coming into her room. Great idea. I was also able to capture info I needed. I was able to be aware of who was entering, who I spoke to. I used my sign in sheet to remind me of who I spoke to and enter things I had either needed, requested, shared, or felt uncomfortable with. It became my visitor information log or book, which housed my information, concerns. And so, another great idea, if you have an opportunity to have someone who is there with you, excellent idea. Excellent idea. Um, but always, we've been saying this for decades, have a book that is your journal book that you keep in your emergency bag and or purse and or back pocket, and just write. The art of writing is still here. Write down everything that you can. If you're not able to have someone there, and if you are able to have someone, they should also be writing in your book. Writing when you get pain medication. You're so out of it, you don't remember if it was an hour and a half ago or 2 hours ago. So at least write it down. When I'm advocating for someone, I wind up normally having to first talk to the nurse so that the nurse can go to the chart and read to me when, because the warrior that I'm advocating for, even though I believe them, it may not be solely accurate. And I want accurate information as to when it was entered into the chart. And that's always controversial. That's another story right there. Um, but write it down before you receive it. Write it down because then you might be able to get some rest, but you may not remember, particularly if you're at a 10 out of 10 and you're just so out of it. Someone said they created an ER notebook. Excellent. I recommend that. But I also recommend not just for that, I believe in patterns. If you're going to the hospital often or always the same time around the same year, write down what's happening. However, we're at time, and I'm really thankful for all of you for having joined us for another mini seminar. This time, part two on legal implications in sickle cell disease. There will be a final part three, and Mary will have to put that in the chat because I don't remember the date for the third one. But of course, stay tuned. We're known for our newsletters and we put information out there, so stay tuned for that. Art, as always, full of information. It's great having this December 2nd, Etta said. Etta is everywhere. Etta is everywhere. Thank you, Etta. As always, this conversation was great, and before you know it, we're already at time. So thank you.
But
Truly,
let me say one other quick point, and that is because we brought up note taking.
okay.
You know, we being the seniors around here, you know, used to take notes with clay tablets, and you're talking about writing with paper clip. Many people today make notes in their phone, and let's
Yes.
not rule that out.
Oh, yeah. We're
Uh,
not pulling it out. That's
you
excellent.
know, you can take pictures and make notes in your phone.
Yes. Yes.
And then you want to get them out of your phone, but don't rule that out. That's okay.
You're correct. You're correct. I,
So
I always have well,
I'll
I
keep my play tablets.
yes. I'm old school, so for me it's notes. But I can just do this. But you're right. Your phone has notes. You can put it in. It has the date. Um, and I'm not sure how sophisticated about the time part, but it does have the date of when you entered it. Uh, so yes, notation. Period. Whether it's written and or you're using your digits to put it in your phone, please record it. Please record that. All right. Well,
Okay.
um, another great seminar. Thank you, Tabitha. Tabithia. Thank you. Um, so, everyone, we're going to give you back your Saturday. I know that it's pretty hot across the nation, so we're hoping that you can enjoy. If you're that you're getting cool, that you're hydrating. Hydrate, 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 particularly during this time. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget to register for the 15th annual Sickle Cell Disease Educational Summit. Look forward to seeing you guys. Be well. Bye bye.